In this video, we're going to discuss the liver. So, the liver has a whole host of different things that it does. It's involved in all over, kind of all over the body, and has its hand in every pot. But it falls in three major categories. We're not talking about hematological because that's blood. So, mentioned the liver and blood before. But we're going to talk about a little bit of metabolic and bile production because this is going to be more for digestion. So, metabolic functions of the liver, first off, is going to be carbohydrate metabolisms. So, we already talked about this in response to insulin and glucagon when we talked about the endocrine system. So, remember, glycogen is going to be the major carb storage molecule that hangs out in the liver and the muscles as well. That's going to help with blood sugar levels, so blood glucose. So remember with insulin, this is decreasing your blood glucose and using it. So you've eaten something, you release insulin, so you're going to use the blood glucose and it's going to go into cells. And any excess, you're going to make glycogen. Glucagon is the point is to increase your blood glucose. So it's low for whatever reason, where you're going to break down glycogen to help increase your blood sugar or your blood glucose. We also have lipid or fat metabolism. It's going to help regulate triglycerides, fatty acids, and a major one, cholesterol. So the cholesterol, remember, is part of cell membranes and one of the functions. But we can use fats for kind of hormones, other things. So part of fat metabolism. And we're going to talk about bile as well, which is part of lipid metabolism. And then you have amino acid or waste product removal. So when you're breaking down amino acids that they need to be used for sugar as energy, so you have gluconeogenesis, where it's making new blood sugar. So for whatever reason, a lot of times when glucagon's around, you're gonna break down amino acids so you can increase your blood glucose for energy. Well, the amine group is going to be broken off by the liver. Then the liver converts the amine as ammonium ion part of it is going to result, and then it can convert it to urea, which is going to be a major component in urine. So it's a waste product. There's also vitamin storage. So the liver can store fat soluble vitamins, which are A, B12, D, E, and K. If you are a water soluble vitamin, they're not stored. So they're not stored in the body. You're not kept it. So you eat water soluble vitamins and you urinate it out. So they go out. Fat soluble vitamins can be stored in the fat. So water soluble, just leave. Fat soluble can stay. You also have mineral storage, the major one going to be iron. Now remember, iron is going to be the major component of carrying oxygen. So remember, oxygen is going to attach to the iron molecule in the middle of the heme group, the heme pigment in hemoglobin in red blood cells. So you're going to store iron in the liver when you need it to make red blood cells. You never get rid of iron because you're always going to be making new red blood cells. You also, any drugs, and this isn't just illicit drugs, this can be medications that can be deactivated or metabolized in the liver and broken down into parts and then taken care of. I'm not going to go into major detail, but we break down drugs in the liver or the kidneys. So the liver's broken down in lobes and then further broken down into lobules, and they can contain hepatocytes. Remember when we talk about hepatic, anything hepatic, that means liver. So hepatocytes are liver cells. And they kind of arrange in kind of little kind of triangular or hexagon shapes. It's irregular. And kind of can be spokes on the wheel. Usually these plates are only one cell thick and they're separated by what we call sinusoids. Remember, those are going to be capillaries that have a large holes. So remember, fenestrated is a hole. So these are capillaries with large holes. And they also don't have a basement membrane. So a lot of times it's going to allow a lot of movement in these sinusoids and between these plates, which are these cells. So all these plates are just kind of one cell thick. Blood again enters the sinusoid, so you're going to see kind of these really large capillaries that have holes in them, and they enter those sinusoids from our hepatic portal vein and your hepatic artery. So hepatic portal vein and your hepatic artery is going to bring blood supply into your sinusoids. Hepatic portal vein is coming from a lot of parts of the intestinal tract. So things like your superior mesenteric, your inferior mesenteric, all of those things are all leading to the hepatic portal vein that's going to go to these sinusoids. Hepatocytes next to these sinusoids are going to look at the solute and nutrient levels, and they'll either absorb things that they want to take in, or they're going to add things to solution that they want to get rid of that they've made. So they're made products. So they'll kind of add and subtract to the sinusoids based on what's going on in those sinusoids. We also have stellate macrophages. So we've heard about macrophages a bunch. These guys, again, are going to be the eaters. So they eat anything. If there's damaged cells, if there's damaged blood cells, if there's something nasty in there, like a pathogen, then these are going to help. So these are eaters, part of the immune system. Again, we store iron. If we want to store it, we don't want to get rid of it. We're always going to need iron to make red blood cells. Sometimes we can store some fat. So we can store some fat for energy if we need to. And sometimes it can absorb or store any heavy metals. So they're not necessarily bad things. If we need any sort of heavy metal to make something, we can store it in the liver. All these sinusoids are going to go through and they're going to drain towards the central vein. And then the central veins come together and form hepatic veins, which then go to the inferior vena cava. Another major function of these liver cells is to make and secrete bile. So anything that's green on these pictures is going to have to do with bile, because bile is green. So bile is produced and released into bile canaliculi. And then we go to ductules and then leads to ducts. So we're going to see bile ducts again in lab more often, but we're going to lead to bile ducts, which is going to lead to the small intestine. Specifically, it's going to lead to the duodenum. So bile again is made, and it's going to be made for fat digestion. So we'll talk about bile a lot when we get to the fat digestion video. So looking at bile, 1 liter of bile is produced by these liver cells and released again into the duodenum. So it's released into the beginning of the small intestine. What is bile? Bile, we always add water to things. Water is needed for chemical reactions, things like hydrolysis, chemical reaction using water to break down bonds. They're bile salts that again are going to help with fat digestion, some cholesterol, pigments, and some other ions. And again, we'll talk a lot about bile when we get to lipids. So this is fat digestion. What it does is emulsify fat. And again, we're going to talk about this more significantly when we get to the fat digestion. But when you eat fat, it kind of goes into a big glob because we got a lot of water and it kind of hangs out together. Well, if we were trying to break down this fat blob with enzymes, it's going to take a really long time because it can only go on the outer surface. Bile actually breaks down this big fat blob into smaller, more manageable fat blobs. So then we can have enzymes that can go all the way around these little circles and they can be more efficient in breaking the fat down. And then it allows, again, since the water is kind of surrounding around it, water's everywhere in your body, that you can actually have water and fat mix and make these little blobs. So this has to happen to allow pancreatic, so from the pancreas, lipase, a fat digestion to help digest fats. And again, we're going to talk about this more when we get to the fat digestion video, just kind of the beginning part. What is your gallbladder do? It is just a little storage container of bile until it's needed. So it contracts and push bile when it needs to go into the small intestine to the duodenum. But if you've made extra and you don't need it quite yet from the liver, then you're going to store it in your gallbladder. That's why necessarily you don't need a gallbladder. A lot of people have it taken out, and then you have to eat a lower fat diet just because you can't store bile, but you're still making it because it's made by hepatocytes in the liver.